I'm Mangino. Welcome to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast. I've been a radio talk show host for half of my life and nearly half of that right here in Pittsburgh. And so on my podcast, we talk about everything that matters to us all, from current events to Pittsburgh history, social issues to sports, politics to practical day-to-day life. And today we're diving into the world of politics. Interesting story that is out today in the Post-Gazette. Headline, PA voters will soon pick the people who will run the 2024 election. So, a national group is fighting election denial. So this group out of Washington is called DemocracyFIRST. And what it's doing is it's putting on a level of pressure on candidates who are running for county races, whether it's the Allegheny County executive race or county council races. And the reason why they're doing this is because the state sets the policy for how we're going to conduct the elections. However, it is counties that will ultimately be making all of the hands-on decision-making processes and running the elections. For the past couple of elections now, my wife and I have decided that we wanted to work the elections. And we have, most recently, the 2023 spring primary, before that, the 2022 general election. And what we have learned is that the process is remarkably reliable. What got me to do this in the first place was the whole idea of election denialism. This idea that people have a belief that Joe Biden won the election fraudulently, that there are all of these reasons to have great concerns in the process, and you can't trust the results. Now, in all honesty, they don't trust the results when they don't win. They have complete confidence in the results when they do win. And in honesty, they have trust in the results when they lose, providing they don't have too much of an emotionally vested interest in that candidate. So you have races where people care, and obviously they do, they'll go vote. But they don't have that impassioned belief and connectedness to, and so they don't have this denialism mindset. Another thing that can come into play is when the elections are overwhelming. Now, the same people who have the denialism mindset for Trump and his loss to Biden in 20 have that same passion toward a Doug Mastriano. But the man was beaten so handily, I mean, just absolutely off the charts spanking by Josh Shapiro, that any kind of an argument about how fraud was involved in the process just wasn't going to go anywhere. Now, you look at the 20 election and the fact that Biden won by, 70, 80,000 votes, that's not a big enough margin. Now, it was a big enough margin when Trump won by about half that margin to beat Hillary Clinton. Oh, that was good. That was legit. But it wasn't for when Trump lost. And that's pretty much where people are. The denialism is in place when they have a passionate belief in somebody and this refusal to accept reality as it is. You have all of the cases that have gone to the courts and the loss after loss after loss that Trump experienced, not only here in Pennsylvania, but around the country. The level of conspiracy that you have to believe in is beyond the ability for people to comprehend. It genuinely is. You have to have Democrats and Republicans in the swing states all collaboratively pushing forward in this direction of wanting to kick Donald Trump out and put Biden in, even elected officials that supported Donald Trump, where they campaigned for him, with him, on his behalf, financially contributed to his campaign. All of those people had to be involved as well. in Georgia and Arizona, great examples of that. But my wife and I decided we wanted to go and we wanted to participate. And what we were able to witness, both in November and in May, was that there are checks and double checks, and there's such a level of redundancy that the idea that people could vote on behalf of somebody else and do so in any significant numbers that would overturn the elections within one particular precinct, let alone what it would take to have to orchestrate something like this across an entire county and then multiply that by the entire state. It just it can't happen that way. It just can't. And once again, there's no evidence of it. But if you want to believe something badly enough, you'll believe it in spite of all the evidence to the contrary. So Democracy First is come up with a pledge. They've come up with this pledge, and they want prospective candidates to commit to this pledge. It's 4 points. And what they're looking at is, one, they want candidates to support every eligible American citizen's freedom to exercise their right to register and vote in free, fair, accessible, safe, and secure elections. Why would anybody be opposed to that? I don't know. Denounce any attempt to intimidate, harass, threaten, or incite violence against opponents, their supporters, and election workers. Why would anybody be opposed to that? However, we go back to the 2020 election, and there were many people that were intimidating, harassing, threatening, inciting violence toward election workers primarily. These individuals who were responsible for nothing more than counting votes. That's it, counting votes. So it gets a little bit tricky there. Also, restore trust and faith in our democracy, not undermining our electoral process by knowingly propagating falsehoods and misinformation. The biggest reason why people do not have faith in our election system isn't because our election system is irretrievably flawed and broken. It's because individuals knowingly propagated falsehoods and misinformation. They've been lying to the American people. They do it on the national level, Trump at the lead, and then statewide officials in many portions of the country. They know there wasn't fraud. They know that the election wasn't stolen, but they don't have the courage. They don't have the inner strength to push back on the belief system of the people who ultimately have put them into office. What they do is they weigh the balance and they say, listen, we could tell everybody the truth in my deep red district, whether it be houses or Senate seats. But if I were to do that, I'm going to get primaried. I am then going to lose. And I don't want to lose my seat. I've got a really cushy job. I'm making some really nice money. I've got power. I've got prestige. Who cares about virtue and honesty and ethics? No. I'm going to go ahead and push the lie because I have a large enough number of people who are in my district that want to believe the lie. And so I'll go ahead and encourage them in that disbelief, even though I am undermining the democracy that I swore an oath on the Bible to uphold. Okay, and then you have this final one. Accept the final election result and concede the contest if I lose after all ballots are counted. I will support the peaceful transfer of power and certification of the election. Any claims of election irregularities or requests for recounts of election contests will be submitted in good faith for judgment by election officials and or the judicial system under the law without intimidation, violence, undermining faith in elections through disinformation or other unlawful means. There are people who have a very difficult time with that last one because I am not in such a state of where I think that no fraud could possibly ever occur in any circumstances. No, there is. We've had people who have been prosecuted for it. We have people right now who are facing criminal investigation on a federal level for putting forward fraudulent electors. There are people who are willing to commit great crimes against this country. And then there are individuals who do it as well. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. What I am saying, though, is that you go to the courts, you go to the appeals process with election officials at the county level, at the state level, and then you go to the courts, which everyone has the right to do. And then once the decisions are made, you accept the decisions that have been made and you move forward. You don't try to undermine democracy because of a desire to get someone into office or for an individual to preserve their position in office. That's what Democracy First is trying to get people to pledge to. Jordan Wood, the executive director of Democracy First, says this in a quote, "We really look holistically at the important positions in presidential battleground states that play a role in the administration, certification, and counting of elections. They describe themselves as cross-partisan. But, according to the story in the Post-Gazette, a list of 40 county-level candidates in Pennsylvania who have signed the pledge release, it looks as though overwhelmingly they're Democrats, majority Democrats. They're willing to uphold this list. It's a partisan issue to believe in our system. It's a partisan issue now to believe in our elections, to believe in our judicial system. Remarkable. The individuals that they're going after, most notably here in Allegheny County, Sara Innamorato, state representative, she has the Democratic nod to succeed Rich Fitzgerald. There's also Joe Rockey. She signed, by the way. Joe Rockey, who is the Republican nominee for the county executive race in Allegheny County. According to reports, the group has not yet contacted Joe Rockey directly. However, in a request for a statement, his campaign released, quote, "While we have yet to hear from this group, we can assure everyone that Joe Rockey has complete faith in the electoral system and is confident that it is conducted honestly." He just lost significant numbers of votes within the Republican Party just by saying that. As the only moderate in the race, Joe Rockey shares the view of the majority of Allegheny County voters that extreme political positions on either end of the spectrum can only lead to disaster. Mr. Wood went on to say that Democracy First would not campaign for or against Mr. Rockey or Ms. Innamorato. If the Republican joins the pledge, they would just applaud them both for doing so. They do have the financial means to be influential, though. They do. And we'll get to that in a second. Election denialism has increasingly become something of a political litmus test in GOP politics over the past few years, according to the Post article. More Democrats signing on, fewer Republicans signing on. Last year, they focused on the governor's race, not only here in Pennsylvania, but also in Arizona and Michigan. Here, it backed Josh Shapiro, and they backed Secretary of State races in Arizona, Michigan, and Nevada. And it uses the election pledge, quote, to identify threats, end quote, or candidates unwilling to support election certification and other principles in the document. And they had this to identify threats. And I think that they're accurately describing this because individuals who will not accept the results of an election and cannot present evidence of widespread fraud that would overturn an election, they are a threat to democracy. I go back to Bill Barr, the Attorney General under Donald Trump, that said it was BS. All of the claims were BS. He didn't see anything that rose to this level. Nothing. And Republican attorneys general, Republican prosecutors in districts all over these battleground states, there wasn't one case of widespread voter fraud that was presented. Not one. Not one. This organization spent about $200,000 in Pennsylvania's May primary election to support pro-rule of law Republicans, by the way, in 8 county commissioner races. The group raised more than $5 million last year, $3 million of it from one individual alone, a philanthropist out of Oklahoma named Lynn Schusterman. What's really remarkable, too, is that we have about 30% of Americans, pushing really close to 50% of Republicans, that believe that President Joe Biden won the White House only through fraud. Only through fraud. That according to a poll from Monmouth University. And what's so disturbing about that is that they have this guilty until proven innocent mindset to our system. They do. It's guilty until proven innocent. I believe it's guilty of fraud. It's corrupt. What's your evidence? I don't have any. Oh, but you believe it anyway. Yes, I do, and I'm not going to move off of this position. No matter what's said, no matter what's presented, no matter how many people, regardless of political party and legal authority, come back and say that there's no validity to this. Even when you're talking about the courts, all the way to the highest levels in state Supreme Courts, blue and red states, and the United States Supreme Court, obviously weighted to conservatism. It's 6-3. It's not even close. And they saw no evidence of fraud that would overturn an election. But still, you have 30% of Americans that are believing this. Christopher Bork, he's a pollster and political science professor at Muhlenberg College in Allentown. Talked to him countless times on my show. He says groups like Democracy First have sought to bolster electoral processes in key states since the 2020 election. And he's expecting lingering tensions from that race that will be very contentious as we move toward 2024. I think he's right. That's despite growing Republican interest in bipartisan reform since election deniers got largely crushed in the 2022 midterm elections, and they did. They got crushed in red states, let alone the purple states like Pennsylvania. For those who believe election processes remain unfair, agreeing even to fairly innocuous pledges like Democracy First's might appear dangerous. And for many Republicans, they do think it's dangerous because their support is so locked in to rejecting the trust in our elections that to suggest that they are fair may cause people to not bother to go out and vote for you. And then finally, he says there's still a strong core of individuals who don't buy the 2020 election outcomes and therefore are still highly suspicious of any type of electoral reform or electoral process that they think might be somehow undermined. So just a simple pledge of being decent, of not threatening people, whether they're voters, supporters, poll workers, or vote counters. That may be too much to ask. To tell the truth about the election process, to not willfully engage in disinformation and flat-out lies, and to accept the results of the election after making all reasonable appeals to state, local, and judicial authorities. How is that too much to ask? You tell me. Thank you for listening to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast. Be sure to click the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. And by the way, new episodes drop Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Pittsburgh time. For more on me and the show, be sure to visit ManginoTalks.com. If there's a topic that you would like me to talk about or a guest that you would like me to have on, please send me an email, Mangino@ManginoTalks.com. Follow me on your favorite social media platform by using @ManginoTalks. And then once you're there, please like, follow, subscribe, and share the pages with your friends and your family. And thanks once again for listening to the Mangino Talks Pittsburgh podcast.
Talk to you. Oh, I want to talk to you. You can take